Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode number 19 of our series of webinars, Chats with the Experts. The theme of our conversation today is how effective communication can shape an amazing customer experience. My name is Sergy Frias, and I'm the Chief Customer Experience Officer at the Chartered Institute of Marketing Management of Ontario, also called CIMO. And I'm also the the CEO at CX Hub Smart Consulting, and I am a senior aerospace guy with a passion for customer experience. And over the last 20 years, I've been in customer-facing positions, and I've learned a few things. So I love to share those. I love to share that experience, and that's why I joined CIMO. About a year ago. So the idea is that CIMO, what we try to do, we try to help the marketing professionals to improve, to grow, and mainly to learn how to be more ethical on their day-to-day life and their challenges with marketing. So we try to make the world a better place through marketing. While at CX Hub, we try to do is to help people and organizations to make the transformation from the focus on the operations to the focus on the customer. And so we say that we try to make the world a better place through customer experience. And exactly because I think that customer experience is one of the best ways to improve the quality of the human interactions. This is something, being at CIMO and being at CX Hub is something that I really, really enjoy. And then I created a few months ago, since last year, I created the Chat with the Experts, which is a series of webinars, which with the purpose of bringing different perspectives to things that we see every day, right? So people talk about customer experience every day, everywhere. What I try to do is to bring people that don't call themselves experts in customer experience, but they really are, because they see customer experience every day, but from a different perspective. And that's what I want to share with you, bringing a lot of different guests. For example, we had Claudemir Oliveira from Seeds of Dreams talking about positive psychology applied to customer experience. We had Tim Beck and Ron Costa talking about small startup communities making top-notch technologies available to everyone. We also talked to Omar Ghanem, a true servant leader, explaining how to use that in favor of great customer experience. We also had Joe Pine, the best-selling author, and we talked about his book, The Experience Economy. We also had Ricardo Dal Bosco, a personal branding expert that knows everything about the image and how this can impact the way you're seeing about your customers and how it affects your experience or their experience. We also talked to Claudio Garcia, talking about customer experience on the healthcare business. We also talked to Mark Gordon, a Canadian expert, a customer experience expert, talking about a few secrets that they don't want us to know about customer experience. We also talked to Juliana Scarpa, the CEO of First, and also Alexandre Santilli, the founder of Teia, both of them talking about customer experience and education. And we've learned how education, or how lifelong learning can help on customer experience, and how customer experience can help on the learning process. So it was two amazing conversations. We also talked to Talita Kuzler, the head of customer experience at Atento, talking about the new format of the call centers. We also talked to Jean Bliss, the best-selling author, talking about her book, her amazing book, by the way, Would You Do That to Your Mother? We also talked to Rick Denton. He's a managing principal at EX for CX, talking about execution, how execution can help on customer experience. And we also talked 3 weeks ago to Erico Fileno, the head of design and innovation for Visa in Brazil. We were talking about the importance of design and how we can make design help us to create amazing customer experiences. And our guest today is Lawrence Sergy. By the way, beautiful family names, sounds a lot like my first name, so it can only be beautiful. And she is a public speaking and communication expert. And Lauren has helped thousands of people to become more effective leaders through skilled communication. She has worked with clients and audiences in Canada, US, United Kingdom, Europe, including KPMG, Grant Thornton, and University of Alberta, and many more. Lauren teaches programs on business communication at the University of Alberta, and her book, The Handy Communication Answer Book, was featured on Library Journal's Best Reference Books of 2017. Her upcoming book, Unmute, this one here, I have a advanced reader copy with me. This book, Unmute, How to Master Virtual Meetings and Reclaim Your Sanity, will be out in late summer this year. I had the chance to read the book, and I have to tell you, it's an amazing book. But what is weird is that every time I was reading all those things, and I was thinking, she wrote a book about me, but she forgot to mention my name, because it's amazing how she relates to things that we see every day on our new virtual lives, let's say. So it's an amazing book, and when it's available, I suggest that you buy it, and then you see how weird it is to read, about you in that book. So I would like to welcome Lauren, and thank you for joining us on this series of webinars. Lauren, did I forget anything that people should know before we start talking?
Nope, you got it all. Very thorough. Thank you.
So thank you very much. So Lauren, I was preparing for this conversation because, of course, talking to an expert on something, you have to read about the something so that you don't look dumb. And I saw a lot of definitions about, for communication. But there's one that I liked the most that was something like this. Communication is giving, receiving, or exchanging ideas, information, signals, or messages through appropriate media, enabling individuals or groups to persuade, to seek information, to give information, or to express emotions. But I was missing something, so I kind of added something like communication can happen by means of speaking, writing, body language, and behaviors, and it must be understood by both parties involved in the process. Tell me, what is your definition of communication, and can you describe how complex communication really is?
It is so complex, and really the definition that you gave kind of encompasses it. The communication is that someone sends a signal by any means. So like you said, written, verbal, nonverbal, whatever, they send a signal by any means, and someone else receives it and interprets it. Interpreting it correctly is actually not part of the definition. And that is where the complexity of communication really, really comes in, because it depends on two people understanding one another. For the communication that we want to happen, the two people have to understand one another, and that's hard. That's complicated. There is mental baggage going on. There's misread signals. There's misunderstood language. There's a whole host of issues that could happen that really mess up those signals. It could be something like the technology breaks down. You can't read the handwriting. The video is garbled. Anything like that can break down communication. But communication really is going on all the time, because ultimately it is just that someone sends a signal and someone receives it and interprets it. At its bare bones, that's what it is.
Mm-hmm. Very good. And what would you say are the most common sources of bad communication? Because maybe the understanding is not part of the definition, but it's part of the end result, what we really want with the communication. So what would be the most common sources of bad communication? In other words, why people think, and that's what normally happens, at least with me, I'm sure that I'm communicating well, but the person simply doesn't get it. And then we find trouble because of that. So what are the main reasons?
The main reason for that is that we're stuck inside our own heads when we're communicating. So we communicate the way that we want to be communicated with. We communicate based off of our own understanding of a situation or how we would interpret a message without considering how the audience would interpret it. And it's by audience, that's just anyone who is receiving your message, one person, 100 people, whatever. We don't spend time thinking about how they might be interpreting it or what in their world is influencing their interpretation. So a lot of stuff basically gets kind of lost in the middle. And that's where many, many miscommunications happen. The other area where bad communication starts to occur is that we don't realize what signals we are sending. So we assume that communication is always voluntary and is always consciously done. It's not. Whenever you have two people together, there is going to be a ton of involuntary subconscious communication. And even though it sounds like, oh no, do I have to obsess about the signals that I'm sending all the time? No, you don't have to obsess about it. You don't need to, you don't need to go completely crazy worrying about it, but you need to be aware that signals are being sent, that it's happening. And without that awareness, we kind of take it for granted that the other person is just a blank slate, that there is nothing being transmitted. And that tends to be when you start to receive things like unintended slights or people reacting the wrong way to someone else's presence.
So to the first part of your answer, I guess we were talking about empathy at the end of the day, right? So the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes and see from their perspective, because that's when we would understand how they may be interpreting what you're saying. So so do you think that empathy is something fundamental in communication?
Absolutely. It's everything in skilled communication. It's absolutely everything. And often when people think about empathy, many I find say, oh, well, that's so fluffy. That's such a warm, fuzzy, huggy idea. I don't want to worry about that. I'm just the facts. I want to be straight. I want to be totally upfront and totally honest and transparent about what I'm communicating. But the notion of empathy being the foundation of communication has nothing to do with how transparent you're being or how factual you're being or anything else. Empathy isn't always about making other people feel better. It's about understanding the emotional component and basically being able to put yourself in the other person's shoes when you're communicating. And having a lot of empathy can make people extremely effective communicators, the kind of communicators that can bring people together, that can help get projects done, that can get a message across clearly and concisely and get everyone on board. And if you twist it, here's where I say it is not fluff, or it's not just warm fuzzies. If you twist it, it's also what makes people extremely adept at manipulating others and being able to twist words so that they can get what they want out of other people. So empathy is neutral. How you use it is good or bad, but it's the foundation of communication.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And thinking about what you just said, empathy is one of the most important things in customer experience, right? So to be able to deliver something that will create an emotion that is a positive emotion, you have to understand or be able to put yourself in their shoes to understand how your actions will impact them and what kind of emotions they will feel. And as a consequence, what kind of memories they will keep, which will ultimately define whether they're coming back or not, or the way they talk about your brand, if they, their purchasing behaviors will define everything, right? So to the theme of this webinar, right? With the theme is, how can communication shape an amazing customer experience? What would you say about this? What would we have to do to be able to shape an amazing customer experience through communication?
Well, it all comes back again to that whole notion of getting inside, being able to step inside your audience's shoe, getting into their heads. Like you mentioned earlier, reading the book it was like it was talking about you. Every customer experience ideally should feel customed customized to the customer. It should always feel to the customer like it is wholly about them. And really, that is how you want to spin your communication, what you want to do in your communication. It's not about subjugating yourself to the customer. The customer isn't always right. Sometimes they are absolutely wrong. But do you understand where they're coming from and why they might think they're right, or what it is they really need from you in that moment? And that is what enables you to shape your communication around their experience. Some of this is really about taking a ton of personal responsibility for who is understanding who. My view on communication is that you always want to be working your communication so that it's as easy as possible for the other person to understand you. It's not their job to understand you. It's your job to make yourself understandable to them. To take what it is about your product and service and explain it in a way that makes sense with how they're using it, how they're experiencing it, what they want to get out of it. Of listening deeply to whatever problem it is that they might be having, turning off that part of your brain that's saying, oh, they didn't read the manual, or they have they're trying to get something that they're trying to get something that doesn't exist, and instead saying, okay, where are they coming from and how can I help them now? So it's always that notion of spinning everything in service to the customer through your communication. It's not about, like I said, it's not about debasing yourself. It's not about being servile or anything like that. It's simply about saying, from their perspective, this is their experience. How can I make their experience easier to understand? How can I relate better to their experience?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And so at the end of the day, this is really a good segue to my next question, which is about the fact that today the consumers more and more, they expect to have something customized to them, something specific to them. Whatever they buy, whatever they pay for, they want to be specific to them, not just something we all get, right? But how can we be able to deliver customization when it comes to customer experience through communication if people are so different? Because we have customers that are so diverse. They come from different geographies, cultures, they speak different languages, they different genders, different ages, everything is different. So how can we have a kind of a common language that will allow us to communicate, delivering to some extent customized messages, but at the same time without having to talk to one person at a time? How can we have a, let's say, mass customization of communication?
That is such a good question. What people are wanting is the feeling of customization. They want the feeling of being understood. And this is a big thing in communication. They want to feel like you get them. You understand where I'm coming from. You get what I need. Ultimately and logically, they know they're not the only one. They know they're not that special. So it's not that you need to fine-tune everything to the individual, but you can look at a group of customers and start to develop a bit of a psychographic profile of who they are, why they're coming to you, what's going on in their life. And I try to do these profiles before I have my first encounter with the customer, or very quickly into that first encounter. Because you can't always do this beforehand, but you can quite quickly, through a few questions, figure out what's going on. The questions that I like to ask are, what are their demographics? So what's the age group? Where do they come from? That's a big one. Where do they come from? And what is going on in their world right now? So where they come from can also include, by the way, what industry they're from. If you're looking at people in a certain geographic area, so it includes geography, it includes industry, it includes age, it might include gender. You want to look at those kind of factors. And then, like I said, you ask what is going on in their world right now that is affecting where their head is at. What are they thinking about? Is there huge economic upheaval? Is their industry hot at the moment? Like, have they invested in video conferencing right before the pandemic hit, and now they are just hot, hot, hot? That will tell you something about what their overall mood might be in. Are they experiencing serious economic crisis? Are they experiencing instability within their country? What stage of life might they be in? If you deal with people who come to you as customers at different stages in their life, what stage of life are they going to be in? Because you can usually start to figure out similar problems or similar things that are affecting these people. And that allows you to understand how to shape your language around where they're at the moment. Then the big question, the big clincher that I always like to ask is, what's keeping them up at 2 o'clock in the morning? And if you're able to do some thinking about your customer in advance of your encounter with them, that is a really powerful question, because what is keeping them up at 2 o'clock in the morning isn't necessarily what you're helping them with, but it's something that's going to be affecting their headspace. So if you look at everything that's going on in their world, their 2 o'clock in the morning question is something like, how can I grow my business profits 10 times by next year, by this time in the next calendar year? And they're in an industry that is really, really hot at the moment, that's booming. Well, it is very likely that they're in a frame of mind that is not just risk tolerant, but keen to take on risk. They're probably in a very innovative frame of mind. They're trying to think of where they can go next. What new things can they do that are going to give them a leg up? They might be willing, they're probably interested in talking about returns on investments rather than ways to protect themselves. So looking at that, you can kind of say, okay, I'm going to use language that's really heavy on the innovation side of things. I'm going to be talking about a lot of possibilities. I'm going to be painting a big picture of where we can go with this thing that they want to do with me, whatever it might be. On the other hand, if you're talking to someone, let's use another example. I am from Edmonton, Alberta, and Alberta is oil economy. We're not doing good right now. We have been under a major bust for the past few years. So if you're talking to a company involved in the energy sector in Alberta, unstable economy, unstable industry, strongly affected by COVID, under serious threat from other newer energy sources, what they're perceiving isn't innovation. They probably have a high need for security. They are likely very risk averse at the moment. They want to protect what they've got. So that's the language that you come at them with. That's the stuff you highlight in your experience. Here's how we'll keep you safe. Here's how we'll make it through the next little while. Here's how I'm going to support you right now. Very different tone. But those two tones, the tone of innovation or the tone of expansion and the tone of security, could probably both be applied to the same service or the same product. It's just how you spin the language. If you don't have the chance to do this thinking in advance of the conversation, usually you can get to it within a few questions. So I love starting just about any communication scenario. I try to get the other person talking as quickly as possible because I want to know about them. And the more they talk, the more information I can dig up for myself, but the more they feel like I am invested in them. I'm telling them what you have to say is valuable, and I'm giving you the space to say it. So that is a communication that says, I respect you, I am interested in you, you can trust me, starts to build that up in communication. And then ask questions like, what's going on in your world right now? What's your number one priority? Related to what we're talking about or not. At the moment, what's your number one priority? Where would you like to go in the next, however, what would you like the end of this meal to be like? Where would you like to go in the next 6 months? How do you perceive a successful encounter here? Get them talking like that, and you'll very quickly be able to figure out, okay, this is where I can fine tune my language when I'm speaking to them. But you're taking the time to get into their heads before coming out and communicating from your perspective and telling them what you've got to offer.
Yeah, well, hearing what you said, I took two things here, basically. One is that you have to shape your language based on preparation. So if you can prepare, if you can tweak the words and adapt and adjust the way you're going to say something so that it aligns with their level of anxiety or their mood or their status, whatever. However, I also took something that sounds to me like kind of a core communication component. It's something like in all those conversations, regardless of what the mood is and regardless of what they are feeling, what's happening on their world, you can still resort to the same things, like make them feel comfortable, make them feel like you are listening to them, that you think that they are important, and make them feel welcome. So is there this what I call the core communication components, the ones that fit everywhere? And if you use that, doesn't, because very frequently you're there, you don't have time to actually dig to learn more, and you have to answer a question. And are there those kind of core components in communication that if you always use, your chance of success is higher?
Yes, one of them is definitely getting the other person to talk.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely, because that is where a lot of the trust building is going to happen. The other one is to very clearly understand what it is your business, your company offers people or does for people or does with people, and be able to express that in multiple ways.
Mm-hmm.
Your understanding, your ability to describe what it is you do for others is going to be part of how you attract clients and how you attract customers to you. And when you really figuring out that exact phrasing of how it is you help people, what it is you do for people, will also help you define who it is you are most likely going to be talking to.
Mm-hmm.
So a core communication concept for me is know your audience. Know your audience. For people in the workspace, you should have a really good profile of your audience, even if it's a broad one, because you do a thing and there's going to be a set of people who come to you for that.
Mm-hmm.
So that those people are going to have a lot in common, a lot. And that's what prevents you from having to constantly rejig what it is you're saying, or always feeling like you're in preparation mode. That deep understanding of your core audience is going to help you settle into your message and deliver it easily and consistently and clearly over and over and over, and make those little tweaks when you have to. But you can't be everything to everyone.
Oh yeah, that's something I've learned very early in my life, not even before my career. But do you think that this type of way of communicating, or using those core communication concepts, would be a way also to deal with situations like the ones that I live every day? Because, when Gen X like me has to talk to a millennial or a Gen Z, I really don't speak their language, right? Regardless of, if they're speaking English and I'm speaking English as well, we don't talk the same language. And I remember, and by the way, that's an interesting case. I went to see electric car, a Tesla. I went to their dealership, which is in a shopping mall. It's a store. It's not a dealership. It's totally different. And when I got there, I was talking to a millennial, and clearly we were not talking the same language. Because I have to agree that I was the ignorant part there, because I didn't understand the concept. When I got there, I started to ask the same questions that I would ask in a regular dealership. So what is the autonomy? How many kilometers, and what is how many horsepower? And then the lady was looking at me like, what are you talking about? There's no such thing here. We don't talk horsepower here. We talk seconds. How many seconds I go from 0 to 60 or 0 to 100. That's how we talk. We don't talk power here. We talk speed or acceleration, or time in this case. They use time as the measurements for that. And then I started asking about maintenance, and she was like, maintenance? What maintenance are you talking about? So there's no, you don't bring the car back. There's no moving parts on this thing except for the wheels, right? So and all kinds of stuff. And I left that place feeling like I felt like 100 years old because I simply couldn't connect with that reality. But
Yeah.
if I was smart enough and had a a set of things that I could use, or kind of core concepts that I could use to communicate, could I avoid that feeling of being 100-year-old man?
Possibly, but I would say that's all on her.
Mhm.
All of it
Well, she was
was on
selling.
her.
I was the customer. Well, I
She's
gave
selling.
up being the customer after
Yeah, after a
I
while, you
realized
give up
how
being the customer
uncomfortable I
because
was.
as the customer, it's not your job to do that thinking. So her big error there was, again, not thinking ahead of time. And you could say, well, it's in a mall, anyone might come up. Okay, who's anyone? There's going to be this group of people. There's going to be the boomers, the Xers, the millennials. 3 different car buyers with different habits, different psychographics, and you could think through all of them. Well, what sort of question would a boomer or a senior Gen Xer likely ask? Maintenance strikes me as something pretty reasonable because this car doesn't work like their other cars do. So if she thought from that angle, she could say, hey, here is a really great chance for me to introduce a new concept, but I have to be able to translate it.
Mhm.
So what could you compare the maintenance schedule to? There's no moving parts. It would be as if I'm trying to think of something that has moving parts and something that doesn't. It would be, it's the same difference as an old computer with a spin disk on the inside versus a flash drive.
Mhm.
Nothing in the flash drive spins, nothing moves. The flash drives last a lot longer than those computers with a spin disk. Same thing here with the Tesla.
Mhm.
There's no moving parts. So the
Mhm.
maintenance is a completely different concept. She had an opportunity to to translate horsepower into whatever it is Tesla measures their stuff by. That's an opportunity that she missed because she didn't think about who might be talking to her in advance.
Mhm.
She was probably thinking purely, and I'll assume she's a millennial. No slam against millennials. I am one myself. She's probably purely in that mindset. This is what millennials care about. We care about I'm not saying that anyone else doesn't, but we care about the environmental factors. We care about the cost savings. We care about the longevity. Okay, cool. Harp on that stuff when you're talking to someone who looks my age.
Mhm.
Be prepared for the other stuff, depending on who walks up, and you might be surprised.
Yeah.
It could be that someone who looks 80 years old comes up and is talking about steady state hard drives, and there's no problem translating it.
Mhm.
Okay, cool. But at least you were prepared. So that
Mhm.
concept of being prepared for communication, that's a core one. And
Mhm.
we don't typically prepare for communication because the assumption tends to be that if you are a good communicator, you do it on the spur of the moment.
Mhm.
And that's not true. People who are good communicators that tend to spend a lot of time thinking about how they're going to communicate.
Mhm. Yeah, I have to agree. I have to agree. Let's talk about something, more or less in the same direction in terms of how to be effective in communication. These days, there are so many different media out there. You are bombarded every day with so much stuff, and there's even some research in here in North America that says that an average person in North America is bombarded by at least 1,200 marketing messages per day. How can we make our message hit that person differently from the other 1,200? And not become like just wallpaper like all the others, because the vast majority of the 1,200 we simply don't see. They're there. We know they're there, but we don't actually see them. How can we stand out in an environment like this?
Yeah, that can be a tricky one. I am definitely one of those people that tries to limit the amount of media I take in because it's information overload. And because we are in an info dense environment, I'm a big fan of Seth Godin's permission marketing approach. I am a very big believer that the majority of communication we do with our customers needs to be in the spirit of generosity and without the intention of making a sale. So we take our communication, and they know that when we send them a message, when they see our billboard, when they see our pre-roll pop up, our pre-roll ad pop up in YouTube or whatever, they're going to get something interesting out of it. They're going to experience something that is enjoyable, is delightful, is useful, without them needing to take the extra step of them buying something. So if all of our communication is do this, use us, come to us, all of that push, 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 then we start to tune it out. But if it is, I made this cool thing, it might be for you. We're asking them to consider it, but not necessarily make the commitment. If we send out email messages that say, I learned this and thought you might find it interesting too. Doesn't matter if it's a mass email to hundreds of thousands of people. If your customers, and you did your work and you know what your customers are looking for, if your customers get value from it, they'll still say, oh, it was for me. Oh, this is personally interesting. Okay, I'll open up the next one. We have to view communication as a trust activity. And it takes time and repetition and practice to build that trust. If we only save our communications for when we want to sell, that trust doesn't get built up.
Yeah, I guess that this explains why even in my courses, I used to say that people love to buy, but they hate when people try to sell something to them. I guess that's the reason why. So because of this trust, or because of this pushy aspect of the communication. So from the beginning, you're pushing not your message, you're pushing the people away. That's what you're actually doing, right?
It is what you're doing, and you're telling them, I don't care about you. That's basically what you're telling them. Another way to really stand out is to do the unexpected with your communication as well. The expected, here's an example. The expected right now with emails is very clickbaity type titles. You'll never believe what we're putting out next. Just wait till you see what's coming up. Those types of really clickbait titles. We're getting used to seeing that in email communication because for a long time it worked. What if your subject line, no matter who you spoke to, was basically the thesis statement for what was in your email? We are doing XYZ on June 30th. Okay, it's not compelling, but they know what they're getting into, so maybe they'll open it up. That's a little bit of trust. I am going to tell you up front exactly what I want to tell you in the email. That's a little different. That might get people to respond. Different can be unexpected in terms of how you send out your messages. Maybe if instead of sending out emails, you do a return for certain customers, you do a return to postage. So if you want to invite them to participate in something, send them a letter. Now you are shifting their expectations. You're breaking the pattern. I do not send Christmas cards to my clients because everyone does, and it's not interesting anymore. I send them Valentine's cards in which there's always a picture of me doing something cheesy. I'm holding balloons, I'm offering flowers, and every year I write a brand new cheesy business sonnet to express my love for my clients, and I send them all out. And they're fun. I never mention, hey, look at my website, I've got a new book, I can't wait to see you again. I never mention anything like that. It's just something unexpected. It's a break from the normal Christmas card. And people have written back and said, I haven't gotten a Valentine's in years. This was so fun. It also took effort, and people do respond very positively to effort. So if you show in your communications that you put that thought into it, that you targeted, you thought deeply about who your audience is and why they are choosing to engage with you, that effort will show and they will respond to it, even if they know it's a mass send.
Yeah, and I love that people respond well to effort.
Yeah.
I kind of knew that already, but I never heard it. So hearing that from you is very interesting. And I guess
Here's actually along those lines. I'm going to chop right in there, just barrel in. Along those lines, several years ago, I occasionally do MC, Master of Ceremonies work at corporate galas and large meetings and whatnot. And one year I was hired to be the Master of Ceremonies for the Dairy Farmers of Canada's annual general meeting. After we signed the contract for me to do this, the event organizer said, "Oh, by the way, do you speak French?" Now, for everyone who is not in North America, Canadians and Americans aren't exactly known for being multilingual. And I do speak French, but not very well. So I told them what they could expect. And then and I only had about 2 weeks to prepare for this, by the way. I hired someone fluent in French to translate. They said 50% of the program has to be in French. I'm sweating bullets.
Mhm.
I will do my best, right? So I hired someone fluent in French to translate all of the areas in my script that I had tuned to the largely Quebecois French audience. And then I worked with them for 2 solid weeks on all of that to get the pronunciation down as much as I could. And many of the French contingency, many of the particular, again, most of our French speakers in Canada are from Quebec. So many of the Quebecois farmers were coming up and they were like, "Thank you. Thank you so much. No, the French isn't perfect.
Mhm.
We appreciate the effort. We
Yeah.
know you took the time and it shows. Thank you." That's what they cared about, was the effort.
Hmm. Yeah, this is amazing. I definitely have to use that more. But look, we spent 40 minutes already, and we
Already?
didn't talk about the book.
Oh,
The
we have.
Unmute, the How to Master Virtual Meetings and Reclaim Your Sanity. As I mentioned, it's a very easy to read book, very entertaining actually. It's fun and it's interesting because I relate to a lot of stuff that happens there that I see there. And tell us more about this. Why did, of course, we know this is going on everywhere, but what drove you to write about that specifically? Being a communicator, being an expert in communication.
Yeah. This was very much written in response to clients of mine who were reaching out to me at the start of the pandemic saying, everyone's had to start working from home. Our meetings are awful and they're not getting any better. Like, that was the big thing. It's not getting any better. And I've been wanting to write a book on this for some time because we were moving towards where we're currently at with virtual communication. We were moving towards there anyway, particularly with virtual meetings and remote work, even when people are in the same city. What the pandemic did was accelerate where we were going by about 3, possibly even 5 years in terms of the
Mhm.
global uptake of it, even in big companies that normally didn't want to touch virtual meetings with a 10-foot pole. The tricky thing about communication is, like you said right at the beginning, the medium matters. So written communication affects a different area of our brain than verbal communication, different area of our brain than nonverbal communication. Our brain responds differently to the technology or the medium through which we communicate. And there's a lot involved in virtual communication that is drastically different from in person. And it matters. Things like eye contact in virtual medium don't work the same way. Right now, it looks like I am looking at you because, as many people by now have figured out, because I'm resolutely looking at my camera aperture up there. If I wanted to look at you, I have to look over here.
Mhm.
But I want you to feel like I'm looking at you. So the eyes go up to the camera aperture. In order to do that dance, to make it feel like I'm genuinely engaging with you, I have to override the part of my brain that says, but his face is down there. I have to override that part of my brain and consciously change my communication habits, very fundamental communication habits, to accommodate this medium.
Mhm.
That accommodation is tricky because the way we communicate is habitual. It's almost like, it's like a knee-jerk reaction. This is what I would do if we were sitting across the table from one another. Yeah, but the camera can't pick it up.
Mhm.
The camera has a harder time reading things like a heavy sigh. It doesn't know people on the other side. If you're always looking off screen, they're going to be wondering what email you're checking right now, or if you're really paying attention to them, because the eye contact pattern is broken. And on top of that, knowing how to use the technology so that it works for you, so that you're lit properly, so that you can manage 4 different screens in one go, none of that is intuitive. It's not difficult, but for a lot of people, it's not intuitive. And I wrote the book as a way to get people comfortable, competent, and polished on camera and in virtual meetings without needing to invest in a ton of equipment or put in a huge amount of time to, suddenly going home and being brilliant in front of a webcam. You don't need film acting lessons in order to do this. And that the book that I wrote was a bridge to that. Be polished in front of the camera. You need to be. Here's how you do it without losing your mind. And virtual additionally has also made some pretty fundamental changes in the way we work, the number of hours a day that we work, the number of meetings a day that we have, how much back and forth communication is actually expected of people. How do you deal with the lack of spontaneous communication? Those have heavily affected people's stamina, people's energy, their focus. And I needed to talk very frankly about the impact of relying on virtual for everything, on the impact that would have to people in terms of just even their ability to have more than one meeting a day. So that all came out in the book.
Yeah, and I can appreciate that. And by the way, I appreciate your efforts on talking to me, looking to the camera and not to my face, because it's so hard for me to do it. I'm doing it right now, but I'm feeling very uncomfortable because I need to see your reaction to what I say. And when I'm looking to the camera, I'm not looking at you. So I need to see. That's difficult. That's really difficult.
It is. And that's one of the things to realize, is that it's not going to be perfect. We can't recreate exactly the in-person communication experience on camera, but we can approximate it. So I will look at the camera and then I'll check back at you every now and then I'll look back at the camera and I'll check to you. So there's these little shifts that make it very doable, but you have to get used to doing it. And when you first start really engaging in virtual, you have to be very intentional in making those shifts and doing the thing that makes it all work together.
Yeah, being intentional. That's something I have to. Yeah.
Practice, preparation. Again, good communication doesn't happen by accident. And that doesn't matter whether it's in person or virtual, doesn't happen by accident.
Yeah. By the way, I read something on your book that there were 2 phrases that struck me that I was like, oh, that's interesting. Kind of scary, actually. You wrote something like, everything people see carries a message. That's scary in the sense that, it doesn't matter, what I'm doing, how I move my hands, how I look to the camera or here or there to the other screen. And, it all carries a message on how important I feel you are or whatever. And there's another one that you said something like, your appearance predisposes people to take you seriously because there's communication beyond the words. And actually, there's a question. Actually, I have 2 questions here. And again, I'm looking at you, talking to you, reading my paper, looking at the other screen. So a lot of distractions, but yeah, exactly. And both questions are kind of in the same direction as, there's a lot of communication beyond the words. And on this new virtual reality that we live, how does it work? I mean, how more relevant those signals are or less relevant they are?
They are just as relevant. And the interesting thing about the virtual world is that before, many of the signals that we were sending were predetermined for us. So here's what I mean. Communication is contextual. It happens in an environment with you're looking at things around the person. You're seeing the person in an environment at a certain time for a certain reason. And all of that layers in meaning. Part of the context, like when I said, like everything that people see is going to affect how they interpret you. Well, it's because if they see you in a setting that doesn't make sense with how they are used to thinking about you, how they're used to seeing you, the sort of role that you have, that is going to kind of pick at the edge of their attention span. It's not that it totally destroys the communication, it doesn't. People can think around it, but now they have to put in the mental work of ignoring the stuff around you that doesn't make sense. So if you are, this is incidentally why I hate virtual backgrounds. I know I was yelling at you last time we connected about that, and I'll mention it here again. If you were an investment banker and you showed up to a virtual meeting and your office was a complete mess, old food on the counter, a manky old dog bed in the corner, you yourself look disheveled, that is sending a signal of untidiness and messiness and lack of attention to detail that your clients are going to pick up on. It's contextual. Your environment affects your message. They expect an investment banker to be sharp, to be detail oriented, to be meticulous. So you want to look like that. It's not that you yourself have to be the picture of human beauty on camera. It's that the way you look has to make sense with what it is you're doing. Similarly, if you are a construction contractor and you are now doing all of your client meetings via virtual, it might make a lot of sense to set up your camera in your shop so that they can see you in the environment of which they're thinking of you, in a contextually suitable environment. Now, it doesn't mean you need to stage everything to the nines. Like, I know that not everyone has that ability, or that you might be working in an office where you're not allowed to change anything around. But if you're in an office, then it's probably contextually appropriate anyway. But you can do things like make sure your space is tidy, like making sure that, you know, the world's worst golfer trophy isn't on the shelf behind you. You may love it, but it's going to be distracting. You need to make sure that you're dressed appropriately for the type of interaction you're having. It is astonishing, but I still get people asking me, hey, can you tell my team that it is not acceptable to show up in baseball caps and hoodies when we're having a meeting with the senior leaders? Because I think, well, it's virtual. What does it matter? Oh, it matters a lot. And on camera, people have time to do this and to study everything they see about you. So it matters. And it's not that any of this is difficult. It's that before the mass move to virtual, for people who weren't accustomed to working in this environment, they never had to think about it. They were in the context, they were in the office, they were in the shop, they were out in the field, wherever they were in that place, and they knew how they were supposed to physically show up, what they were supposed to wear. All of a sudden, we have to make those decisions for ourselves. And for some people, it's a big mind shift.
Yeah, I can imagine, because I myself, I've been seeing things that are unbelievable. People simply, I don't know, they believe that, okay, because I'm home, it's okay to dress the way I dress at home. And the way I think is that, no, you are working from home. So you are at your work physically at this place that you call home, but you're still working. You still have to dress up and you have to present yourself in a certain manner. Yeah. But it's you said something that is interesting. When it's virtual, people actually have the chance to look at each one of the people, and they don't know you're looking. While if you're in a physical meeting, you have to turn your head and people will see that you're looking. So people don't look. So in a virtual environment, yes, it's easier for people to pay attention to the details, even though the quality of the images may not be as good, but
it may
still,
not be as good.
You can still pay attention. Nobody will realize you're looking. It's very different from the real world.
It's so different from the real world. And we need to remember that. And in many degrees, we need to make up for that. So that's why I get into camera angles in the book. In the real world, we would be able to see body language from about here up. This is more or less where an average boardroom table cuts people off of. We tend to sit at about our belly button level and up. That's where people can see. If your camera is doing this, I have deprived you of all of my body language. The conversation will be much more awkward. It will be, because now they can't read these signals. Now I've lost all of this ability to communicate. And I might think that they understand that I'm really engaged, but if they can only see my forehead, how are they going to tell? You know, can they see my body language? Do I need to bring my hands up higher? The deliberate eye contact, do they know I'm paying attention? Eye contact becomes a signal in virtual meetings that, hey, I'm listening to you. Becomes a deliberate signal, so that everything you do sends a message. It's not about making you paranoid. It's about making you aware that you can control these signals to send the message you want. Just be aware that people are reading and interpreting what you do. You can't stop them, and you can't blame them for misinterpreting signals that you're sending that don't work so well. Like I said, looking off camera all the time, that's an easy one to pick on. But by the same token, that also means that you have control over those signals, and you can use them in your favor to send a stronger message, to create a better experience for the people communicating with you. I am always more concerned about the comfort of the people who as I say, the people on the other side of the camera. I'm much more worried about their comfort and their experience than I am my own, because ultimately it's their experience that matters. That's what will ensure that the message I want to send is communicated and received the way I want it to be received.
And this is how we connect all this conversation to customer experience. Because from the beginning, everything I say is related to customer experience. This is what I do. This is my context, and it's very clear to me. But it's important that everybody that is listening to us, they understand that all of this applies to customer experience. When you're talking to your customer virtually or in the physical world, it doesn't matter. It all applies that. And in your book, you talk about distractions, and we have this, because of the pressure of, having to perform and productivity and so on. It's very common that the customer is talking to us and we are already taking action while they talk. And very frequently sometimes they feel like we're not listening. And very frequently we are not, because you're focused on the other things that we're doing. And also, we lose pieces of this communication, and then we ask them exactly the same thing they just said, which is horrible. It sounds horrible. And when we are talking to people that have a span of attention much shorter than we used to have in the past, it only compounds, right? It makes it even worse, because it's difficult to keep people engaged. So how do you see this? How distractions are kind of amplified because of the change in the profile of the people, and the change on their style of communication that tends to be shorter, less deep, and more superficial, whatever. How do you see that?
I don't know if it's so much the shorter communication attention span. Certainly when you're talking about online, there is the fact that this is mentally more taxing. So it's tiring. That is where those shortened attention spans come in. But I think that most of us are in a habit of, when we're having a conversation, when we're discussing something with a client or customer, we are generally listening in order to respond. That our focus is on our response. Okay, what can I say to this? Okay, what can I say to that? Okay, what am I going to present them? Instead of the focus being wholly on what they're telling us. So slowing down in communication, I like slowing down how quickly you speak is one thing. I always preach that, but also slowing down the pace of the communication can be very helpful. It gives the other person the chance to feel like you have paid attention to them, to feel heard. So if they want that feeling of customization, they need to feel heard first and foremost. So let's say that you have someone looking for a solution and you have your usual suite of 3 solutions. Within 10 seconds of them speaking, you know which one is for them. Right off the bat, you know which one is for them. It is a very different experience for them to talk, and then you just say, I know exactly what you need, to interrupt, to cut in, and then present them with the solution that will feel hurried, than it is for them to talk for a little bit and then you to say, tell me more. Even if you already know what they want, tell me more. Okay. And why is that the thing that you're looking for? Okay. Well, I think that I know what it is you need. Now it feels customized because you listened, you asked questions, you took the time, you showed the interest. The end recommendation is the same. But what you're doing is using communication almost as a performance, but also very much as a relationship building activity. So taking that time, listening to understand, listening to ask a better question versus listening to respond will help further that customer relationship. And you could be selling them a car, you could be selling them a contract, you could be selling them a sandwich. That feeling of relationship is what's going to keep them coming back to you because you listen, you paid attention. It was for me.
Yeah, on our chat with the experts number 4, we talked to this car salesman from Honda. He definitely doesn't call himself an expert in customer experience, but he's really good at that. That's why we brought him to talk. And that's exactly what he was selling, that, you know, he never sells cars. Although he has a track record of, 500 cars sold, he says, I never go to the dealership thinking about selling cars. I go there to talk to people. I go there to make friends. And you know what? Friends love to buy cars from me. I keep selling, that's interesting. And when I guess we are already beyond our time here, but just one thing that I wanted to talk about before we finish here. You wrote about boosting signals, and I think this is a very interesting concept. And I guess you just mentioned this. How you show that you're interested, that you're paying attention, that you value their opinion. You're basically boosting a signal, right? So you're reinforcing that feeling, and then the person will give a lot more credit to whatever you tell them after that, because they know that you're saying something based on what they told you, right? Is this a correct interpretation of this, that what you just talked about is about boosting the signals, making sure that it's clearly understood?
Absolutely. That it's amplifying. And when you boost a signal, when you amplify what someone's saying by repeating it back to them, or you use body language that works with what you're saying, that enhances your words, all of that makes the meaning that much clearer and cements it that much more strongly in people's heads. So it makes it easier to remember in the long term as well. So I like to see, again, with this whole part of the practice of communication is always, how can I make the message clearer? How can I make it stronger? What is the purpose of our interaction right now? Am I here to build a relationship with this customer so that I can make an incredible sale 5 weeks down the road? Or am I here to solve a problem with them really fast right now? And I want them to know that I'm going to get on it right now. So I will use slightly, I'll have a different energy when I speak to them to do that second thing. There's so many ways that you can boost your signal, that you can amplify what it is you're trying to get across. A lot of them are nonverbal. In virtual, your background, what people see of you, what they see of your back, this can all be used to boost your signal. Do you want to reinforce your brand? Awesome. Have a branded coffee mug in front of you. Do you want them to get a warm, fuzzy feeling? Great. Have a soft plush throw on your chair. Little stuff like that can create a much, much stronger message. And that's where you can get really creative, I find, with your with your communication as well.
Yeah, that's
staging. I want to say this thing. How do I turn up the dial a little bit?
Yeah, that's staging. That I talk about this on my course as well. I guess that we have to finish here. I will say the last phrase that that caught my attention in your book, that was keeping people engaged is a cat herding exercise. I love that, because that's absolutely true. You can't keep everybody engaged all the time, right? So you have to be herding the cats, or the you know. But anyway, I have just one question here from Andre. He's asking, Lauren, in your opinion, what's the most important part of communication when I need to understand the customer issue?
Have them explain it back to them in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't repeat what they said. Repetition does not confirm understanding. But if once they tell you something, you can say, oh, so it's kind of like this, and then you explain it in a different way, or you create an analogy for it, a different way of talking about that problem, and they say, yes, that's it. Now you know that you both fully understand each other. So I like to ask for confirmation. What I'm hearing is X, Y, Z, and I always phrase it in a different way, or using a different analogy than they did. Mm-hmm. And then if, like I said, if I got it right, they'll say, yes, awesome, we can move on. If I got it wrong, it makes it easier then for them to clarify what it is they're telling me, because now they'll know how I interpreted it. Mm-hmm. And they'll say, no, it's more like ABC, not XYZ. Okay, mm-hmm. Then you do the process again. Mm-hmm. So I'm a big fan of that rephrasing and that checking back behavior. Mm-hmm.
Very good. So if you had to leave only one message out of everything we talked about, and people would leave this conversation with carrying only one thing, what would that be?
Communication takes preparation. So think about your conversations before they happen. Great. It's an exercise in possibilities. It's an exercise in possibilities, but play with those possibilities in your head, because then when you're in that moment, you've basically prepared for it.
Mm-hmm. Very good. So your final comments, and if people want to know more about you, know more about your book, how can they find you?
Easiest way to find me is at laurensergy.com. So first name, last name, .com. And then if you'd like to know more about the book, including I'll be doing some early release bonuses with that, as well as letting people know when it is broadly available, head to unmutebook.com. And if you sign up, I'll send you those announcements once it is broadly released to the market.
Very good. So I have to thank you very much. It was a very interesting and enlightening conversation. I've learned a lot, and I took a lot of notes here, so I'm going to share this with people one day. But thank you very much for, sparing that time to talk to us and help us to understand how communication can improve our customer experiences and help us to get our audience to learn about the subject. So thank you very much. Very nice to talk to you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Thanks everybody. Sorry for being late on the finish here, but I really wanted to talk more, and I hope you forgive me. So this will be on my website probably in a day or two. So if you want to review something, it will be there available for you. Thank you very much. Have a great night, and I see you next week with another very nice, interesting guest that will talk about something that I will only publish tomorrow. Thank you. Have a good night. Bye-bye.